let's explore the wonderful world of blending modes. What are blending modes? Blending modes are going to be our first look at compositing with inside of Photoshop. Compositing is one of the most useful features for a designer or anybody really using Photoshop. I composite stuff all the time. What does composite mean? Composite means blending one or more layers together. Blending one or more layers together. Blending modes are also non-destructive. It's a parametric function, which means it's a mathematical equation to lighten or darken pixels or color pixels to do different stuff. We're going to look at blending modes as they relate to the layers panel. However, you will see these blending modes in other areas of Photoshop, including layer effects, and they work the same in those other areas once you kind of understand the concept. It is a pretty complicated concept if we went over each one in detail and talked about the math and exactly what it's doing. We don't have hours to go over that. So I want to explain it quickly as an introduction for beginning graphic designers. Okay? So there's a lot more to it. We're going to look at the basics and the most useful functions for each. So if you don't have the starter file open, please go ahead and download that and open it up. Then what we have here is volleyball court on the beach. And I have this layer called luminance. I'm going to turn this on because it's going to show us very visually, very easily what the main blending modes do. So we have our active layer, which is our luminance layer, and we're going to blend the pixels of our active layer with the pixels of our background layer, doing a simple composite. At the top of the layers panel, you see normal, which means there is no blending mode applied. So I'm going to hit the down arrow to look at all these options. I think there's 27 or something like that, somewhere around there. And they're broken up into categories. This first section, darken, and going all the way down to dark color, that darkens the pixels. Every pixel excluding absolute white. So 100% white disappears. Every other shade of color, right, between black and white except absolute white, darkens between the two layers. The most common of these used is multiply, all right? Darkens the first one, multiply is the one that most people use. I had a professor have the saying once, the three you must know, schmo, which is screen, multiply, and overlay. And those are the ones that we're going to focus on and talk about. So multiply or any of these darken options. Darken the pixels for everything except absolute white. What does that mean? Well, let's click on it. Let's click on multiply. What you're going to see is black stays, white disappears, and then this 50% gray in the middle darkens, and the white disappears and the black stays, darkening what's underneath. If we go back up here and we look at these are the exact opposites of the ones above them. So if those darken pixels, these ones, hint, hint, are going to lighten pixels, screen is the one most often used, and it's going to lighten every pixel except for absolute black. And it's going to disappear. So let's click on screen, and you can see our white stays at 100%, and with our 50% gray, the blacks disappear and the white luminance stays. Then if we come up to screen and now we go to the third category, we're going to ignore these bottom two. These are very obscure and we'll look at these ones in another layer. But in this section here, we create contrast, which means we enhance the white and the black but don't do anything to the middle. All right, creating contrast. And overlay is the most common one. So what you're going to see is that we increase or darken the pixels and lighten the pixels, and the ones in the middle, 50% gray, we do nothing to. It's going to create contrast within our picture. Darken the darks, brighten the brights. If And that gives you a general. You can also cycle through these really quick. So we have all these selection tools. And if you look, it's overlay right now. But I can hit Shift and plus or Shift and minus, and I can cycle through all the blending modes, assuming one of the selection tools are active. And you can do this like I'm doing it and just get an idea of what each one does really quickly. And you can look at cool effects that it might do when you're working on a Photoshop project. So that's Shift plus or minus. Also of use, we know Schmo, the three you must know. So if I do Shift Option S, that gets me to screen. Shift Option M gets me to multiply. And you guessed it, Shift Option O gets me to overlay. And those are the three most common. So let's look at a practical use for this. Because you're not just going to have triangles with color, right? That's just a visual representation. So let's look at a practical use of this. I'm going to turn on my volleyball with a shadow. So let's assume you're working with a client and you've done product photography, which is often on a white background, and wherever the light goes, in the opposite direction, it casts a shadow. And you want to add that product or that object not on white, but onto another image while keeping the shadow. Now, some people who don't know what they're doing would try to delete the white and make a selection and only keep stuff. But we know that there is a blending mode, so let's make sure it's active first, that there's a blending mode that's going to remove white. So let's try Shift Option M for multiply. There we go. Shift. Well, wait. I'm going to undo that. Before we do that, I want to convert this to a smart object. We're going to talk about smart objects in a future tutorial. But understand, if you're going to change something, a smart object is going to preserve the original photo and do non-destructive changes. And we're eventually going to make this volleyball smaller. So we want to do a smarter object so we don't destroy pixels when we make it smaller. In case we want to make it bigger again, all the pixels are still there. All we need to do is right click in the layer to the right, convert that to a smart object. Then we are going to do Shift Option M for multiply. That's going to knock out the white and keep our shadow. But there was white within our ball, so that lightened it. So what can we do? I'm going to show you another quick technique, making a selection. Again, we are going to cover selections in another tutorial, but proof of concept, I'm going to take this elliptical marquee tool and I'm going to draw out a circle, something like this, and oops, we need to make it a little bit bigger, so we're going to go up to select and transform that selection. And all I'm going to do is drag out to kind of get as best we can. And if I were doing this for real, I would be way more accurate on my selection. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just trying to make a marquee selection around the ball. I'm going to hit return to keep that selection with the marching ants. I'm going to create a new layer below this one. So with this layer active, when I come down to new layer, if I click option, we can call this white knockout. So I option clicked on the new layer. I'm going to click OK. And I want white knockout to go below our ball. And with our marching ant still active, I'm going to fill that with white. I'm going to hit D on the keyboard to make sure that it goes back to black and white. And then white is closest to the space bar, which is the command key on the keyboard. So I'm going to command delete to fill that with white. And if I turn the visibility of the volleyball off, you can see there's a white circle underneath, and that masked out that blending mode. I'm going to command D to deselect. We want to kind of sync these up in case we shrink them, right? So I'm going to shift click on both of them, and I'm going to right click and link the layers so that if I do something to one, like resize it, I'm going to redo it to the other. So now we have the ball, kept the shadow. It's way too big for our image. So let's Command T to free transform. I'm going to hold Shift and keep it proportional and drag it down. And since we've linked them together, the white knockout is moving with the ball, all right? Or shrinking with the ball. And I'm just going to put it here somewhere. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to hit return, just make it smaller. I want you to see that the shadow is still there. Then I'm going to turn on our Adidas logo layer. And we want to add this Adidas logo. Say this was an advertisement for Adidas. And in an ideal setting, we would have the original logo file with all the layers intact and we could do whatever we wanted. But oftentimes when you're doing a proof, you don't have access to the original source files. Or if you're working with a smaller client, they might not have the original logo and you might just have a JPEG version or something you scanned in. And you want to get rid of that or knock out that white background. Again, you can make a selection and go through all that hassle, but it's not going to look good. It's going to be a lot of work. The edges are going to be jaggedy. Instead, real world example of using our blending modes. If we again do Shift Option M, it's going to knock out that white. Shift Option S knocks out the black. All right. So Shift Option N, we multiply that layer of Adidas, and we can move it, anywhere we want. But that's a quick and easy way to knock out white or black and get us a proof of concept for a design that we can show the client before we work with the actual assets. So we covered blending modes really quick. There's a lot more to it than that. Remember the 3 you must know: Schmo, screen, it's going to lighten pixels, multiply is going to darken pixels, and overlay is going to create contrast.